Welcome to Right Start, an equipping module for the pastor in transition. I'm Blake Bradford. I'm the district superintendent of Northwest District and dean of the cabinet. You also see my email and my website, which has some resources as well. In this session, we're going to be talking about passing the baton. I've got one of those track batons right here in my hand. Of course, we've used this metaphor for a few years now. It comes from a book by Jim Griffith and Jim Osier called The Changeover Zone. And they use the metaphor of a track baton. And there's a quote here from Bruce Miller. Pastoral leadership is not a trophy to lift, it's a baton to pass. Well, imagine, there's this thing called the handover zone when you are in track and you're doing a relay race with a track baton. And the idea of the handover zone is that, if you're in the relay race and you're passing the baton, you don't just throw it at the next person or just, I'm going to hold it out here and hope you grab it. The handover zone here is the time when the one runner that's about to be handing off the baton accelerates. There's also a time when the person that is going to be receiving the baton is also running. And then during that 20-meter handover zone, that's the time when after tons and tons of practice, you hand off the baton to the new runner. And of course, for the church, it's the length of time when you intentionally, in a prepared for, practiced way, are both moving fast. You don't slow down in pastoral transitions and hand off that baton of leadership as in a way that is fully intentional, is thought out, is the saying goodbye, the saying hello. It's all of a choreographed piece between the two pastors and the congregation. So on passing the baton here, we're going to continue to use that term, and I encourage you to maybe contemplate using it along with your pastor that you're going to be handing off to and receiving from. Working with your staff parish, use this as a metaphor of the fact that we're not going to be slowing down in this pastoral move, this change of pastors. So in this session, we're going to be talking about this handover zone. How are you going to be passing this baton? What are the pieces that you're going to need to do? And particularly for the pastor that is going to be entering a church and deciding, okay, how do I want to focus my time? But we'll get there in a moment. The first thing is saying goodbye well. Now, when we're referring to saying goodbye well, the first piece is frankly, helping the congregation grieve. I know these folks mean so much to you. You have done their baptisms. You have presided over funerals and weddings, been a part of folks' lives. And so you need to be honest with yourself and your own grief. Be honest about there is a change, and that's how we do things, United Methodist Church. If you ask for a move, you need to be honest about that. Along the way, we greatly encourage you to encourage healthy boundaries and the new relationship that you, the current pastor, will have with the congregation when you become the former pastor. And that means certain things like not going back for funerals or weddings. We'll talk more about that in a second. Another piece that you can do to say goodbye with grace is to make sure you leave everything in good order. If there's bills, make sure they're up to date. Make sure the tithe is paid, so paid up, and you're current on that monthly tithe. Make sure records are up to date and easy to find. And we'll have some materials to help you kind of think through what records need to be checked in. Along the way, I do want to remind you really of the Pastoral Transition Covenant. It was approved by orders of the elders several years ago, almost a decade ago. And it is a statement of how we promise to do a pastoral transition, how we exercise self-restraint in order that the pastor following us or successor can be fully engaged in ministry, and when we go, we go. And we really are clear that we're trying to tell staff parishes this too. Staff parishes, churches, don't invite clergy back to lead funerals or weddings or visit the sick or other pastoral functions. Now, pastors, once you're gone, you're gone. When they ask you, oh, can you come back and do this funeral? We don't know the new pastor. Well, no, you don't do that. If of course you can go and sit in the congregation and, sing Amazing Grace, hope you do. If that you feel led to do that, that's fine. But don't make this about you. Let the new pastor do that work and get connected to that family. If you need to go back as a friend, as someone visiting the congregation, a guest, might want to let the pastor know about that, and so they're not surprised. And be careful when you show up, especially in the first couple of years after you leave. You don't need to be that reoccurring presence that takes people back when they need to be looking forward. So this pastoral transition covenant is on the website. I'll give you the link at the end, but we encourage you. It's designed as a PDF you can share. Why don't you, as the pastor, before you leave, make sure your staff parish committee sees it and make sure they understand that you, the pastor that will be leaving, is going to abide by it. The next thing I want to share about is the 90-day launch plan. It's important not to just walk into a congregation, see what happens. In this era, a time of COVID, a time of disaffiliations, of all the challenges that we have to be a lot more intentional with our approach to ministry. And so let me first tell you what I'm telling staff parish committees. Us on the appointive cabinet, and we have a video we're doing just for staff parishes. This is one of the things we're telling them. And this is a quote from a book I wrote a few years back. The arrival of a new pastor is an amazing opportunity for the congregation to mobilize for impact. Receiving a new pastor creates a window, often a fleeting moment, for your fellow members to look at your church with fresh eyes, assess its culture, and use the opportunity for some cultural shifts that could impact the congregation in your community. You can be intentional in how you describe your community, your mission field, and your church's culture to your new pastor. So this is really what we're telling the staff parish on how they describe the church, how they are honest, and letting you, when you walk into a church as new pastor with these fresh eyes, being able to use those fresh eyes to assess what's going on in the church and the community, and talking about that in an intentional way with your staff parish committee. This window of time is a great opportunity, again, not just to learn more about the church, but also to mobilize for impactful ministries. And that's what we're encouraging your churches to do. And that's part of what this 90-day plan is. On Resource UMC, where we're getting some of these materials that we're using in today's session, there's a statement that when pastors receive a new appointment, they have 90 days to prove themselves, to gain credibility, and to start to establish positive momentum. So if Resource UMC is right, and they've gotten some stuff from the secular world and executive changes, I believe they're onto something here. You have 90 days to set a trajectory, to create this positive momentum. So how are you going to be intentional in how you use these 90 days? Well, here's the suggestion from Resource UMC. First of all, first 30 days, accelerate the learning. First, learn about the community. Look up, what's the church's digital identity? Does it have online worship? What's its social media profile? What's its website look like? Does it even have the right worship times and the address there on the web page, on the front page where people can find it? Can you find it when you Google? Does it have a direct me to? Does it have hours that actually match the church's hours? I've seen a lot of churches that say they're closed on Sunday. Not helpful. You need to have all that stuff online. So folks that say ever were to want to visit your church, they actually could. I'll just tell you, as a superintendent who visits a lot of churches, I've been a professional church guest now for years. I've been showing up at worship sometimes, and the worship time online and the one on Google don't match, and then neither one of them match what we have in our database. And I show up and worship's already halfway over. It's happened before. I mean, I'll live with it. I'm a superintendent, but you'd hate for that to happen to a guest that has decided to enter the church's doors for the first time. So some other things to accelerate the learning. One is use data. One example is surveys. And I wrote carefully, use surveys carefully. Be careful with surveys in this. surveys need to be written in such a way as to produce creativity, not to create gripe sessions or to throw fuel on the fire of denominational politics. If you don't write the survey well, it'll add tension and anxiety. So if you use surveys, be really careful with that. Be mindful of implications. You can also use mission insight data as a United Methodist pastor, United Methodist churches. Everyone has a paid access to Mission Insight to use that demographic data. We really encourage you to do it. It's great tools. It's tools that become a conversation starter with you and your staff parish and your board. Use those tools. Use them to ask meaningful questions and to gain greater community understanding, not just for yourself, but also for your church leadership to have a new and current understanding of their own community. Also, what's the financial health of your church? Where are you really in financial health? What's the assessing the current ministries? What are the buildings looking like? There's some things you can see in the first 30 days that after a while you become kind of blind to it. You don't really notice anymore that the nursery is looking not quite up to snuff, or maybe there's a ladder sitting on the side of the building that the first time you saw it, why is that ladder there? And a week later, it's still there. A month later, it's still there. After a while, you don't even notice it anymore. So think about things like this. As you accelerate the learning, track it, write it down, use it for conversation starters with the correct teammates, whether, committees, ministry teams, things like that. So that's the first 30 days, accelerate the learning. Next, the second 30 days is about creating some alignment and getting the congregation to want to move into action. There's a couple of suggestions here. First, convene some conversations about purpose, identity, and the community assets or gaps. Taking some of the learnings you learned in the first 30 days, use that to now convene conversations. Hey, I noticed some stuff. You can talk about the church's purpose and identity. Well, I've seen this on ministries. I know it showed up in the summer. Tell me about what this looks like in the fall. So you can begin those kind of conversations. You can begin conversations about community assets. Your community is not just a group of people that have ministry needs. They are folks with gifts and wonderful assets that can be used for ministry. We need to discover that communities are not just something to be taken care of. They're nestled in group of folks with assets just as wonderful as ours. And we can see how we could team up these assets to look for gaps. Where are the gaps in our community that maybe we could work on together? Beginning those kind of conversations will set a tone for your ministry. And then it'll also provide some space for you to look at the next item, focus on some quick wins. And I'll talk more about the quick wins later. Also, guess what? In the way our calendar works, you arrive on July 1. I also know charge conference documents show up around July 1. And that means you're going to have to start thinking about things like who's going to be on committees in the future. And so now's the time to look around the congregation for teammates. And maybe not even the congregation, outside the congregation even, but who will be your teammates and the work ahead? Who are folks that are hungry for kingdom impact, for seeing the Great Commission lived out in your congregation? Look for those teammates, not just folks that are trying to get close to power, but folks who are feeling really called, love the church, love the community, and want to ready to get to work. Look for those folks and start imagining where they might be able to fit in for the future in your structure. Now I'm going to talk about in the 90 days, the third statement, the last 30 days of the 90. Well, here's the time to deliver some quick wins. And when I talk about quick wins, that means, something that is not just a small team, but it can involve as many people as possible, that probably has a community aspect. You as pastor, your job is not to be involved in every step of it. Yours is to look for fruit and share the wins. communicate about it early and often. Now you might do some, digital work like photographs of all this, the Quick Win, the ministry, maybe some video testimonies, maybe testimonies of worship. When I talk about communication, remember you're doing it for the unplugged and the plugged in. And so when you do communication, think about both audiences in that. Make things you do shareable. If something cool is happening, do it, put it online in such a way that people can click that share button and spread it around to their friends and family and build it into the larger community. Look at what is happening at First Methodist. That's an exciting time for us, for your church to imagine, wow, look what we can do when the Holy Spirit is involved in us and we are saying yes to what God wants us to do. And then celebrate those 90 days, again, online, in person, as many different ways as you can. Now, here's an example of a quick win. And this is an example I got to experience as a superintendent. When an appointment was announced at one church, the Staff Parish Relations Committee was asked to think strategically about an opportunity created when receiving a new pastor. We had happened to be, before we even knew there was going to be a pastoral change, we'd been working through a book about bridge events, about, from the book Keiko Ten and Bishop Farr wrote about Get Their Name. And we had been studying that ahead of time. And then a new pastor's announced. It's like, well, let's do one of these bridge events now. Let's plan this now. And golly, it worked. The church, as soon as the appointment was announced, they started planning. And it was an opportunity in the, they started planning in the spring for an opportunity to build momentum. And they decided to have a back to school event, like a fair with some mission stuff and activities and fun things to do and ways to get to community. And it was a huge back to school fair where they also got names and did follow up. And in this back to school event, the job of the new pastor was basically this: walk around, meet folks. A lot of folks said, hey, have you met our new pastor? The big thing they did is wear a name tag. I'm the new pastor. And so imagine July 1st, this pastor shows up. They've already been planning for a couple of months. They were able to activate it right there for the back to school event in August. The pastor, even if they wanted to, they never could have gotten something together that quick if it was under their own steam. They didn't have to. The church planned it. So when we talk about a quick win, it's something that can be started to be thought about early. And so we're encouraging churches to do that. Now, so I'm letting you know, pastors, I'm encouraging churches to do that. Let's see what happens. You jump in too. See how you can have a quick win in the first few months. So that's an example of a quick win. So the next piece, here we are back at communication. So I want to start by saying a few things. One, please stay connected with your district superintendent. Let her know how the transition is going. The phone here, it works two ways. You're allowed to call us too. We don't mind. In fact, we love it. So give us a call, give us a ring, give us a text. Hey, here's what's going on. We're really excited about this. Hey, here's what I've discovered. Hey, here's my concern. Whatever it is, please stay connected with your district superintendent. You don't want us to have to go hunting for information about how it's going. We'd love to hear from you. So please, I encourage you, please stay connected with your DS, especially in these first few months, in the first 90 days, to let us know how things are rolling. Second, meet monthly with your staff parish committee. I'll say more on that later. Next piece on stay connected is don't let the need to nest getting in the way of your relationship building. Moving day's on a Wednesday. Sunday is coming. Before you show up to church on Sunday, you need to have made at least one or two strategic visits to people that you need to visit for one reason or another. You can ask ahead of time, staff parish, who are those people? And you may even have one of them go with you to make that visit. But there are a couple of people that you need to have visited. And so by the time Sunday morning comes, everyone has probably already heard the pastor visits. And so, and that's not just for that first week, that's an ongoing, that first 9 days. I know, some folks, I'm one of them, love to nest. We got to get everything just right. The problem is, if you spend a lot of time in your office or your house getting everything just right, that's going to be seen as avoidance. So let a few boxes be half unpacked in your office in the corner that you're getting around to. It's okay. First of all, that reminds everybody you're still the new person and they need to give you a little bit of a break. Second, it's a reminder. It's like, wow, I got this box here. I'll get around to it. But first, I've got like several visits. I need to go see some people. I have a meeting. I need to visit some folks at the coffee shop. We're going to talk about the future of the church and the community. Don't let that need to nest get in the way of the relationship building that you can only do once. There's plenty of times to put your book on a shelf. There's only one season that you can make meaningful relationships. Remember what is strategic and important. Next, discover the community. It is really easy to become a prisoner of the church building and a prisoner of the church itself and not be fully engaged in the larger community. So I encourage you, please discover the community. Work with members of the staff parish committee and other members of the church to engage your community. If you're one of those towns where, Friday night football is home games are the place to be, well, golly, you need to show up, wear school colors and a church name tag, maybe even, and see if there's someone, maybe one of the teachers, because Methodist churches, golly, we have a lot of teachers. Maybe go with the teacher, say, hey, can I go with you? Sit together so I know who to sit with and all that. And they can have you maybe if you go with the teacher, they'll show you the co-workers, and you'll be able to meet some of the other teachers at the local school. You can sit, watch the game, have some fun, get to know some people. Whatever your place is in the community, discover more about what's going on and work with your members to help you get out into the community. The last thing I want to say about Stay Connected is also a self-care issue. And that is, don't let everything I just said get in the way or create an isolation from your friends and family. And this is important. I know it's easy to, for some pastors to jump so far into everything that everyone else is left out. Not good for you or your health. So don't isolate yourself from those friends and family. Now, another piece of communication I want to share is the expectation. Well, let me go a little further. Let's just call it the requirement for monthly staff parish committee meetings, particularly in your first year. Now, we have a resource for you on this. We created an annual timeline that recommends topics for 12 months of staff parish relations committee meetings. So you're like, what are you going to talk about? We have a monthly, here's the suggested topic for your meeting. You can use it. It includes, required report dates and stuff like that. It's a tool. This timeline is a tool to nurture healthy relationships while staying focused on a disciple-making mission. But the more important than the actual what's talked about is having the meetings. And so here's what I told in the training modules for staff parish. Here's what I told your staff parish committee. I said, we expect and require these monthly meetings. And one of the reasons is, and we talk about some positive, constructive feedback systems. But one of the reasons is it's really easy for something small to get dealt with if you're meeting monthly. Maybe it's something that's going on in worship that 3 pastors ago, a pastor did that and they didn't like it and it got on their bad side, and you've done it too. You did it unknowingly, and everywhere else it was fine. But at this church, they've got an issue with whatever that is. And it was a little bitty issue that could have been solved quick with one conversation, but month after month and after month went by, you haven't been having staff parish meetings, and suddenly a little bitty thing has now become a huge problem, and it became the opportunity for people to start carping on the new pastor, and pastor doesn't care about us or listen. It becomes a bigger problem, and it grows. You can fix a lot of these things by having monthly meetings. So let me tell you something that we talk around the table. And this is one thing that Rodney Steele told me years ago, I think in his first stint as a superintendent. And cabinets ever since we've been pushing monthly meetings. He said, whenever I see a problem, happening in a church and between the pastor and the church and something's going on, I always ask, have you been meeting monthly with staff parish? And there's a 100% rate of, no, we haven't been meeting monthly. We didn't think we needed to. And so there we are. Not meeting monthly leads to some problems. So I don't think I need to say anything more about that other than please do it and for your own well-being. Also, here's something we're telling staff parish committee meetings, and you can pause this and read the whole thing. I'm not going to read it out loud. This is really about reminding staff parish relations committee that their job is not just policies, and it's not to be the ombudsman, the complaint committee. It's about being relational. It's about listening and talking and helping interpret what is going on in the church and being a group that you can lean on for figuring out the dynamics of your congregation. And so there needs to be a ton of trust in this committee, and you might want to work on a covenant on how you're going to do that together. But it's really important to fulfill, here's what I'm talking to staff parish, live into this too, work on this together. We're not saying meet monthly just for fun. We're meaning for it to be meaningful work. And then also about communication, communicating with the congregation about the transition. Now, depending on your church size and how large of a town and context and all that, there's a lot of different tools you can use: video, shareable social media, in-person stuff, billboards. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. But when you think about the congregation community, here's some things to think about. First, cover everything in prayer. The goodbye, the hello, the whole process, those 90 days, do a prayerful approach. Be really clear about what's going on in the appointment and clergy transition process. One thing is using the right language. We don't hire our pastors, they're appointed. And, the bishop appoints the pastor. We don't have a pulpit committee. We have a staff parish committee. Use the right language, or you need to help continuing to explain the itineracy to our congregations. Communicate the welcome of the new pastor. Design ways for authentic personality and the spiritual heart of the incoming pastor to be shared. Now, as a pastor, you're probably, as you're saying goodbye and saying hello, part of your job as you say goodbye is to help make this happen for your successor. Part of it is in receiving a new church, going to a new church, is working on these principles as you're entering the door. Now, one of the things that we're suggesting are going to be things like cottage meetings and such. And what we're really sharing here about those cottage meetings and those kind of intentional gatherings to get to know you stuff is that it needs to be planned in the spring so it can be activated in July. What you don't want as a pastor going in is to show up on July 1st and look around and no one's even talked about any kind of intentional gatherings. And so by the time you get them on the calendar and scheduled and advertised, well, it's August and September. That's too late. These are activities that need to be planned in the spring so that in the first couple of weeks of July, you're having some of these cottage meetings. And this builds up that narrative of missional momentum and these quick wins. Not having those kind of get to know you gatherings will delay your whole start and could create some huge problems in your overall ministry because of lack of knowledge of folks. So that's reasons why we're encouraging this kind of advanced planning for the process. Now, we do have several tools on our website, and there's the website there you can download for pastoral transition tools. I'm going to let you know what we have on the website so you can download those materials. Again, this is stuff for saying goodbye and saying hello. It's really baton passing sort of information. And some of the material we shared actually comes from this book right here. It is titled Making a Good Move. It's by Michael Conyer. It's not a new book by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really talking about relationships, not so much specific techniques, and sort of a mindfulness. And so while it's a little bit dated, there's really good information in it. So those are some tools for you to use as you're looking ahead. But let me show you some of the online things. One is a question bank for critical conversations. Now, this question bank can be used with the incoming and outgoing pastor. It can be used with committees. There's just different ways to approach that. They're done by subject. So like there's a financial section. So you may want to ask the pastor and the finance chair some of these questions. So now these are questions that may be done in advance or as part of that 30-day assessment, but they're all these are conversation starters, or as it's a question bank. You probably wouldn't use every single question in the same church in one move. It's a lot of different items, but pick the ones that are helpful for you as you're moving forward. Similar to that is a checklist for transitions, and it lists things that you as the outgoing pastor need to get prepared. It may be documents, passwords to all the accounts and social media and database, financial information. This checklist is a PDF, and you can easily share it to several different committees and say, hey, your section is, so-and-so section, numbers 1 through 6. If you could prepare that. Again, it is a checklist where not every item may be applicable to every church, but you can grab what you need and talk to the incoming pastor, and as you're preparing the packet or maybe a set of packets, get those materials together for the pastor. And so just be in communication of what of this is actually useful and might be, what might be a little overkill. So, just work together to figure out what items are really necessary in this transition. Also on the website are some parsonage documents. We have the parsonage standards, the policy set by the annual conference, also some guidelines during a transition about who's responsible for what, and a damage checklist and report. In addition to this is the information about moving expenses. So we do have a account set aside, and for you to turn in, if you live in a parsonage, for you to turn that in, it has to be checked off. The parsonage was all in good order, and once that they say, yep, the parsonage was fine, no damage, then we can pay those moving expenses that we have set aside in the conference budget. In addition, there's a tool for the staff parish committee called 50 Ways to Welcome Your New Pastor. It's a Lewis Center document that actually started in the Arkansas conference with Reverend Bob Crossman. I encourage you to grab it. It's another Lewis Center documents. These are some tools you may want to just print, hand off to the staff parish committee, or maybe they have a welcome transition team, and say, hey, here's some ideas. We may have some better ones, but this might give you a start on being creative. You want your successor to have a great experience coming in, and handing off tools like this are a good way to make sure that happens. Now, finally, I want you to know, and the bishop, Merrill, the cabinet, we all join in praying for you, your family, your sending and receiving congregations, and also the communities you'll be serving. We're going to be lifting you all up in prayer during this season. We're going to be praying for you as we do. We pray over appointments as we go through them. We want you to know that we are bathing the process in prayer, and our hearts really are going out to y'all in these transitions. We know from our own personal experience that moving is never easy, and we recognize that. And being a part of a move means a lot for you and maybe for your friends and your family. And there's a lot of goodbyes and hellos that are pretty emotional, and it takes a lot of energy to do one of these moves. And so please, please, please know that we are lifting you up in this season. So again, this Right Start module is not the only one. There is actually a 3-part Right Start set of Right Start modules for staff parish. So they can use that for their own learnings, and we encourage you to help your staff parish discover those and use those so that your ministry as you leave and your successor comes in can be a good one. This is all on the Pastors and Transition website. Encourage you to look up those materials there. In the meantime, once again, please know that you are in the prayers of Bishop Merrill and the rest of the appointive cabinet. Thank you so much for being a participant in this module. And I look forward to seeing you when we get together in our in-person Right Start workshop later on in the spring. Thank you and God bless you.